Welcome to the Golf Improvement Podcast, episode 122.
Welcome to the podcast for golf lovers and enthusiasts who are looking to take their games to new heights. Dedicated to custom club fitting, short game improvement, and effective practice to improve your golf game. This is the Golf Improvement Podcast with your host, Tony Wright.
Hello, this is Tony Wright from Game Improvement Golf in Oak Ridge, Tennessee with the Golf Improvement Podcast, dedicated to sharing useful information on true custom club fitting, short game improvement, and effective practice techniques. I create exceptional golf clubs. You shoot lower scores. It's great to be back on the Golf Improvement Podcast in 2019. When I attended the Flat Stick Putting Conference in late December of last year, I was first exposed to learning from Paul Dewland from Paul Dewland Golf. I took more notes from his presentation than from any of the other presentations at the conference, and the things I learned from him that day, I'm still using every day in my life and in my golf. So, after his talk, I walked up to Paul and asked if he'd do an interview with me. And in his very laid-back way, he said, sure, that would be fun. Well, you're going to have fun today learning from Paul Dewland from Paul Dewland Golf.
www.gameimprovementgolf.com.
Hello, this is Tony Wright with the Golf Improvement Podcast, and actually the first live podcast of 2019. I'm really excited that you listeners will get to learn today from Paul Dewland from Paul Dewland Golf in Orlando, Florida. Paul is a mental performance coach who helps tour professionals and top-level amateurs. And Paul recently spoke at in December at the Flat Stick Putting Conference. And you have these words on your website. I was kind of looking for something to sort of set the stage. But with some of the groups you talk with, you say you give a presentation that's unique and memorable. And, I really felt that way, Paul, about what you talked about. I kind of feel like, at least personally, I took some things away from it that just helped me. So I was glad you agreed to do this. So welcome today, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks. Happy to do it.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I always like people to talk a little bit about their personal story and maybe describe a little bit about what started you down the road of becoming a mental performance coach for golfers at a lot of different levels.
Yeah, interesting story. I started my education, out of high school. I got educated in the engineering field. So I actually, for a while, worked in a large multinational corporation in facility management. During that time, I learned, I took a lot of courses on management because I was managing staff.
Yeah. And
it sort of woke me up to the fact that I'd always been really interested in human performance and psychology, those types of things. And I just kind of dove headfirst into it. It was one of those things where it just sort of something sparked in me, and I couldn't stop studying the topic. So after a few years of really, getting educated, because I took a lot of different types of courses and things like that, and continue to do so, I just started my own business, consulting to companies. Actually, I had a business consulting business at first for performance.
Yeah.
And a few years into that, I was playing golf one day with an actual club pro, and he had the yips. And I kind of just knew what to do because of the education that I've been provided, and I just kind of knew what to do, and it worked. And lo and behold, the guy was like, I've been working on this for 20 years and I haven't been able to fix it. What the hell did you do? So I was like, all right, well, maybe, the my background in education, because I draw a lot of things from the education or from the engineering field in terms of structure of how to think and be evidence based and that type of thing. So that surprisingly that helps a lot in what I do. But I kind of started to study what was in golf and realized that there was a lot of really good information out there, but I had another spin that I could put on things that I thought would add value, and I just started doing literally hundreds of hours of volunteer work for players whoever would let me work with them to put my reps in, and just it's organically developed into a full-time career. I've moved from Canada. Some of you will probably hear my accent. I moved from Canada about 7 years ago down to Orlando, and things have just organically progressed in a really nice direction. So it's not like I pushed it; it's sort of pulled me.
It's interesting that I don't know if you know any of my background, but about the last 12 years of my life, I worked with a lot of big companies in energy efficiency stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, and in fact, one of the most interesting parts of it was how to get people to implement things.
For sure.
And it was, that was one of the biggest. That was one of the biggest hurdles for a lot of companies. But maybe that's a discussion for another time. But what a fascinating way. So it just sort of morphed into, maybe this is a better way to go in my life, right?
Yeah, I guess. If I don't want to oversimplify it, but I just at one point in my life I decided I wasn't going to do things I wasn't interested in doing. So I've just followed my personal interest, and I've been lucky enough to make business out of it.
Yeah, that's really neat. Well, maybe you already said one of these, by working with a guy in terms of the yips, but can you talk about any other specific sort of aha moments related to your approach to how you work with people and develop, to help them to be able to perform their best?
I guess there's a couple things that really are important for people to keep in mind, because the skill development process can be very discouraging at some points, because just because you're putting the work in doesn't mean you're going to get what you expect out of it. The work you put in doesn't always directly translate into skill. I view it as, there's visible and there's invisible progress. Visible progress is when you can see, the change in your skill. Invisible progress is when you're doing things that don't produce anything you can see yet. And it's like, a farmer grows a seed, they water and water and water. There's no visible progress, but invisible progress is definitely taking place. And, with plants, we know that, but with skills, we can think, well, I'm not getting any better. I feel like I'm going backwards. But I can say for sure that, and for me as a coach, my coaching skills, my communication skills, my skill of being able to put material together in a way that people can understand, that's just all reps. And like I said, when I first started this, I just put hundreds of hours in. No, I couldn't ask anyone to pay me because I wasn't very good at it. So I had to have people say, well, there's no risk, so I might as well, I can spend an hour with this guy and it won't hurt me because it's not going to cost me money. And I put my reps in. That's the way I got it done. And I think that, I presume a lot of the people in your audience are coaches. Coaching is a skill, and you got to put your reps in, and don't shy away from the opportunity to work for nothing, because those reps are worth something. And if you don't have those reps, you might have the knowledge, but you don't have the skill.
Yeah.
So I don't know where I'm going with this, but what I will say is this, that you think Tony, you heard me say this in the seminar, that if you do the right things in the right way, it's impossible not to get better. you just don't always see the progress happening. And that's been certainly true for me. There's been periods where I haven't been able to figure out how to solve a certain problem, and I've just kept at it and kept at it. And sort of out of the blue, sometimes these eureka moments come about how to communicate something, or I discover some material I otherwise wouldn't have noticed. But the whole thing, I mean, I'm around a ton of successful people, coaches, players, etc., and it's all about sticking with it and not tinkering and changing things constantly and searching for quick answers. That is the number one thing that I've seen as an ingredient for people who are really good at what they do, is they stick with it.
Yeah. Almost everybody I think that I've ever talked to, or different other mentors that I have, in club fitting and, I guess now putting as much too. There's no overnight successes. At least I don't, and if they are, maybe they're full of themselves.
When to continue with the metaphor for farming, when the sprout comes through the ground, that looks like it's an overnight success, but that was probably weeks and months in the making of invisible progress. And if you don't understand that that's how things actually go, because anything that comes quick, for the most part, with some odd exceptions, if it comes quick, it's probably not going to last. And this is where people getting quick fixes and tips and things like that, they can have a good 9 holes with that or whatever, but it doesn't last.
Yeah. Well, at the putting conference, you may have even characterized it as a simple exercise about direct control, things we influence, things we have no control over, and obviously can't do that here. But that just was such a profound learning experience to me. And yet when you look back at it, I think when anybody who was there looks back at it, they said, I really know that, but I don't pay attention to it, right? Mm-hmm. How did you start doing that? Maybe that's a good way to sort of dive into this. What led you to start? And I'm sure you use that exercise almost all the time with people.
That's one of the central principles that I teach. I sort of organize things around basic principles for the mental game. Sorry, did I interrupt you?
No, you didn't. I'm good. It's good. I go for it.
Okay. So for the audience, as an example, let's use the farming metaphor again. We'll just probably stick with that for the whole thing because it's a great image to work with. If you look at a farmer, does the farmer actually grow the crop? Let's say you're growing corn. He doesn't actually grow corn. That's not really what he does actively. He creates conditions for corn to grow. And that might sound like semantics, but it's really an important distinction to make, that when you water the seed, you create the nutrients in the soil, you protect it from pests, then you create conditions for corn to grow. So you don't control the corn growing, you influence the corn. And so what happens is I find that people who are more interested in the crop itself than immersed in the farming process with a sense of good faith that it's going to go the way it should if I stick with it and do it right, they get impatient. And impatience comes from worrying about the things we don't directly control. So frustration, anxiety, all of the things that come with golfers, they can feel that way because they're more concerned about the outcome of their play versus the execution, doing their job correctly. So as it relates to golf, you don't directly control your shots. You don't control your swing. You don't control the ball flight. But that's what people have the most interest in. And that's actually the domain of the ego. Is it wants the results to come, whereas the part of us that is actually capable of mastering something is not an ego-driven thing. It's more of a curiosity and a fascination thing. that we're more interested in learning about what we're doing and doing it well than we are having the result come from it. Of course, we all want the result. We all have an ego, but if the ego is the dominant part, then frustration and anxiety is going to be pretty dominant in your makeup, in your emotional makeup. So the people that I've worked with that are amazing at what they do are just they're probably more primarily interested in doing their job really well and learning more about it and getting better than they are in producing the results. And again, I'm not trying to downgrade that the results aren't something we want. It's just not the primary thing. Yeah. And pressure is what happens when we set goals we don't control. Yeah. So if our primary goal is, the sense of self-satisfaction comes from how we score in golf versus, well, I did everything I could, then you're going to have some emotional turbulence.
I love the word, you threw it in there, curiosity, right? Is curiosity something you see people being able to get better at, or some of them innate, or, the folks that you work with, how does that tend to work with the folks that you connect with and help? Because it's important, right?
Yeah, it's to me, curiosity is one of those faculties that is actually hardwired into us as kids. I mean, little kids, they're always asking questions. Why does that work that way? What's that? How come this is? How come that? Yeah. So I think human beings are naturally curious. That's hardwired into us. But then and again, I don't want to overcomplicate this, but using the term ego, the part of us that wants the results from what we do more than we're curious about how things work. If all we want is just simply performance, we want, the crop, we want the score, we want the great swing, we want the 300-yard ball flight. We're distracting, we're interested in that, and we're immersed in that, and we're extracted from the actual learning and growth process itself. And ironically, if you don't learn and grow continuously, you don't improve those results. Yeah. So it's kind of counterproductive to be too invested in the outcome in a bunch of different ways. I mean, just about every time someone has performance anxiety, there's too much of an emphasis on the outcome or what people think, or what it could mean financially. And those things are all of interest to us, but they aren't the dominant thing for the best people at what I've seen them do.
Yeah. Yeah. They all sit in the world of I control what I can control, and I like the results that I get, but there you go, right?
Yeah, and again, I'm not trying to say that you don't care at all about the outcome. We all have an interest in those things. We have an interest in them, but we can't have our primary investment of how we feel like, this is going to sound a little corny, but how we think our life is going based on the outcomes.
Yeah. So, one of your big jobs, I guess, is and you've seen the questions I sent you, trying to help people develop habits and skills, and talk about some of the most important or the typical skills that you most often are working with people to develop. I mean, some of it I think we've talked some of that about it already, but any particular things that, maybe haven't jumped up yet that you want to bring into the conversation here?
Yeah, the concept we just talked about, the controllables, that's a key principle I will work with people for, and that's a skill. You have to actually develop the ability to focus on and measure yourself against what you control. That's something you got to work at. Just like I was saying earlier, you got to put the reps in. You can't just understand the concept and it's really easy the next day to do it. You got to practice what you're focused on. So with that said, the ability to control our attention, to hold your attention on certain aspects of your experience. And in this case, holding your attention on, am I doing my job well versus having your attention on what's it producing. If you can't control your attention, you're probably going to have a hard time implementing a concept like the one we just talked about with controllables, because we have a habit. Attention is basically habitual. We pay attention to certain things by habit. And just like, changing a golf swing, changing what you're focusing your attention on is a skill that requires a lot of work. I don't think there's a better player ever than Tiger Woods at controlling his attention. He could focus his attention on what he wanted to do in his peak. I would watch him, and I've never spoken with him about it, but I'm gonna guess that he had the ability to put his attention where he wanted on command, because he was raised Buddhist, and he meditated. And one of the benefits of meditation is being able to control what we do with our attention. And that's the skill, to me, that's the skill of all skills. If you don't have the ability to focus your attention, you really are losing control of yourself.
Yeah, and that's something I personally, I think I mentioned to you. I mean, I do headspace meditation in the morning. It's a lot of fun. But boy, and I allow myself to get frustrated with the fact that I lose it, right? Instead of maybe just saying, okay, bring it back, get a little better, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So.
Yeah, and that's as skill development goes, having your expectations reasonable.
Yeah.
Just like someone makes a swing change, they're not going to be like, okay, so in 2 days I'll be, hitting it pure every time. You have to be clear on, what to expect as far as the process goes. And that's an important thing for people to go into any type of skill development with is, look, what's ahead of me here? What can I expect as far as, progress?
Yeah. Well, I know you work with a lot of different levels of folks. And this is a little bit of a leading question because, one of the fun things I do is I volunteer to help a middle school golf team, right? Mm-hmm. And I would say that, I wouldn't classify myself as there yet in terms of maybe the right kind of things to do. But talk a little bit about some of the differences in working with different levels of players and different age groups, and some of the takeaways that we might get in terms of, in particularly working with young kids, maybe young kids too, that, there's young kids and young kids, aren't there? I mean, there's young kids that are trying like heck to be superstars, right? And there's young kids that are just playing.
I think the most important thing for young kids is that if this game is not fun, if it's too instructional, if it's work, if they have to do a lot of stuff they don't want to do at too young an age, they just lose interest. The kids like doing stuff that's fun. They don't like doing stuff that's work. And so there's that fine line between giving them tasks to help them develop and making sure that they're having a blast doing it, and creating an enjoyable environment where everybody's, working but laughing. And people were like, no, you've got to be serious. I don't know. I mean, the whole idea of serious, if serious means you're in a hospital in serious condition, you're about to die. And if you make golf life or death, you're screwed.
That's a pretty straightforward way of saying it, right?
I think so. But, number one, fun. Number two, challenge. So you want to play, if for those who want to play competitive golf, get them competing against each other in fun ways. Like, hey, let's see if I can get this in. I remember when I played, golf as a kid, it's like we putted for chocolate bars. And it was like we were out there for hours and we were so-called practicing, but it didn't feel that way. And look, I'm a big fan of instruction in the right way, but in the wrong way, it turns into, never mind, let's, put those chocolate bars away and stop giggling. We got drills to do here. And those are the things that when people have their own intrinsic motivation, they'll take on those seemingly boring tasks because they want to do that. Nobody does well at anything that they have to do.
Yeah.
But people who do well at things they want to do, and helping kids find their own intrinsic motivation to take the step from, fun and enjoyment and it's a game to, all right, now let's take the game and then turn it into, let's view it as a challenge. And that doesn't start happening until, there's no magic age or anything, but, late in middle school type of thing is where I've seen a lot of kids that, they start to voluntarily graduate from the playful stage to the it's still fun, but it's a different type of fun. Now I want to get better, and I want to beat my friends, and I want to compete. So you can't push anybody through these levels. It's like feeding a kid and saying you've got to grow faster. Let's give you double the dinner. They don't get faster any better than any. You can't make.
Then they're ready. Then they're ready to. Then they're ready to get.
They have
faster.
to be ready, and nobody can light the match in them. They have to find that. But look, I've seen a lot of kids walk away because it's too serious and it's not fun. I've never seen anybody walk away from fun.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, you had I thought, a couple of really great definitions at the conference that you said, and one was what do professionals do, what do amateurs typically do, and then what do coaches need to do. And I'm sure these are things that you speak with people about in terms of these definitions all the time, but maybe you could bring those up today and talk about those.
Yeah, so the difference between amateurs and professionals, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, and also, what you see as a coach's job, right?
So to me, the difference between someone who's a true professional, and there is a lot of amateur players that conduct themselves professionally. So I don't want to say professional meaning you make money at it, but rather you're professional at what you do. Is basically amateurs expect good results and hope that they'll do what it takes to give themselves a good chance at success. Whereas professionals say that there's no chance, I'm not doing everything I can to be prepared, and I hope for the best results to happen. And that goes back to what you control and what you don't control. You completely control preparation as far as tournaments go. And for that matter, just casual play. You control being warmed up. You control doing everything you can to be ready to hit good shots and good putts. Whereas people worry more about what it produces and put less energy into being prepared. That's to me the definition of an amateur.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with somebody wanting to just play golf, but.
Oh, for sure.
Right.
And we're speaking more
somebody that's
in line with competitors.
Yeah. Right. And
for sure, I'm all for, if someone's having a blast and golf is their recreation and they don't warm up and they don't stretch or anything and they're going out and they're laughing their butt off out there, I think that's amazing. This is not to downgrade that. I'm speaking more along the lines of competitive players.
Yeah. And I've got my book out of the myriad of notes that I took, and I wrote down what you said. Coaches, when they're doing their jobs well, examine people's controllable actions and hold them accountable, which I thought was just bang, right, spot on, right? Maybe talk a little bit more about that, although it's pretty obvious, right?
Yeah, going back to the fact that if you do the right things the right way, it's impossible not to get better. You can't make players better, but you can make sure they're doing the right things in the right way, which is going to predict them getting better.
Yeah. And
so, when you start as a coach, measure people against their level of engagement, their attention to detail, doing things with full engagement, taking the right amount of breaks. All those things are those are completely controllable, because I think the worst thing I ever see is people who get upset with players as coaches. They get upset with players because they're not swinging the club right, versus, look, you're putting your best effort into putting in the right positions. Because if you keep trying and failing but keep getting feedback about the right position, you'll get there. And you'll get there when you get there, and we can't make you go any faster. So quite often I think the most frail coaches are the ones that measure themselves against the player's outcomes versus measure themselves against the player doing the right work and holding them accountable to that.
I think you said over and over today, you get there when you get there in various ways, right?
Yeah, 100%. You can't make it. You can't determine when it happens, but you can determine getting there as fast as possible.
Yeah. Well, this has been terrific today. Any final comments that you want to say here at the end related to, just things for golfers at all levels to think about that you maybe haven't said already today?
No, I can't.
That's funny. I actually think there isn't anything else. You really kind of covered that. No,
I wouldn't want to add anything else. If I want to leave anybody with the message, it's the only failure is to quit. If you want something and you quit, then you failed. If you keep at it and keep learning about the right way to do things, you will achieve what you're capable of. That doesn't mean you're going to be the best in the world or anything, but if you've achieved what you're capable of, then you've given yourself every opportunity that way. Then that's, to me, John Wooden defines success by doing everything you can to the best of your ability. I agree with that.
Gosh, I read so many things about him, and I don't know how much you watched of him as a kid or his teams, but
I'm from Canada. It was all hockey.
Yeah, well, that's true. But he was pretty amazing.
Yeah, I've done a bunch of, I don't even want to call it research, just gone online and read books and all the rest of it. Just studying what he did and his just his disposition. If you just watch, there's a TED Talk out there with him, and he's his disposition just bleeds patience.
Yeah. Did you read his book, Be Quick But Don't Hurry?
No, I did not read that one, actually.
You would like that book.
That's going on the list.
I'm giving that one back to you. One of his former players who was extremely frustrated about what he ended up doing. He was a superstar in high school, was on his team. Well, I won't give any more than that. I don't want to give it all away, but he learned things that he learned things from John Wooden that he didn't realize he learned, and then he reconnected with him. I'll bet you like that one. So
no, that sounds awesome, and you've left me hanging here, so I want to know more. So
that's why I wanted to do it is leave you hanging rather than just give you the punchline. But there you go. You've created some motivation. Well, Paul, thanks for today. There's a lot of great nuggets today in this episode, and I'm going to put a link to your website in the show notes for people who want to get back in touch with you later. And again, it was a special time to get to meet you at the conference. And thanks a lot for being there and for doing this today. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for saying that. Thanks for having me on. It was fun.
Game Improvement Golf. I create exceptional golf clubs. You shoot lower scores.
Thanks, Paul, for sharing so many valuable insights today. I think many of you listeners will come back to this interview and re-listen to it and learn from it. Helping kids finding their own intrinsic motivation, one of the great nuggets from this interview. And also Paul talking about his definitions of professionals and amateurs. I put links in the show notes if you want to learn more about Paul Dewland and Paul Dewland Golf in Orlando, Florida. Well, here's my first ever podcast shout out. In every future podcast, I plan to do a shout out to someone I personally know who does exceptional things in the world of golf. This first shout out is to my friend Gavin Parker with a Salisbury Golf Academy at the Salisbury Country Club in Midlothian, Virginia. Gavin and his team are highly motivated to every day make his students, and especially junior golfers, better golfers and better people. Keep doing great things, Gavin. I put a link to the Salisbury Golf Academy Facebook page in the show notes. Well, that's it for today. At the recent PGA Equipment Show last week, world expert putting instructor David Orr, creator of the Flatstick Academy, came up to me and said he'd love to do a return engagement and share some valuable information on putting speed control. How could I pass that one up? So David will be back with me in the next Golf Improvement Podcast episode. See you in 2 weeks.
Game Improvement Golf, your source of information and inspiration to become an exceptional golfer now. www.gameimprovementgolf.com